I love the necklace, Tina. That's cute. Is that part of the sweater or is that separate? Oh, okay. It looks like it came all as a set.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Appreciate you coming out. These are the early birds, and I'm excited to see you here this morning. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Luana Norfleet to you. Luana is coming to us from Alamance Burlington School System, and she is lead counselor there, and I asked her if she could help us with the evaluation piece to talk a little bit about it and give you an overview. It's very similar to the teacher evaluation that you're familiar with, so that's good. Very similar to the school library media coordinator evaluation that you've recently had training on, so that's good. But obviously there are some differences, and so I invited her here to talk a little bit about that and kind of give you an overview. So she'll take the next hour and run through some things, and if we have a little time, then I'm sure she'll be glad to take some questions. So anyway, so let's welcome Luana.
My drive-in this morning was interesting. I left my home at about 6:45, and I was rolling until I hit right outside of Concord. But I made it here. I still made it here early. So thank you for having me here. Grant and I, we've talked a couple of times about where Gaston County is overall as far as the level of familiarity with the evaluation instrument, but I always like to know who I'm talking to. So, how many school counselors? Principals? Assistant principals? What about elementary level? That's where my heart is. Middle and high. All right. So we're going to do a quick overview, and hopefully we'll spend most of our time towards the end answering questions. As Grant said, I was fortunate enough to sit on the development team of this instrument, and it was kind of like a meeting of the mind. And we were fortunate that we had administrators, we had district supervisors, and we had counselors from every level. And the ultimate goal is, how is it that we are shifting the role of the school counselor to the 21st century? So that's going to be the overall framework for how we're going to look at this new evaluation instrument. On a scale from 1 to, let's say 1 to 3, 3 being the highest level of comfort, where do you feel? If you're a level 1 with this evaluation instrument, raise your hand. All right. Level 2, level 3. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is this is kind of like our outline for our hour discussion. And I'm one of those, I sometimes overplan. I like to have too much, and if we have to break it down, we can. That's fine. But I want to give you the big picture. I want us to look at the standards, and within those standards, if we have time, we can discuss the elements within those standards. The overview of the self-assessment, the rubric, and the summary. Examples of artifacts, and we'll look at the timeline. And don't freak out about the timeline, because some of us have started, some of us have not started, and we'll get to that. All right. So I know, especially for administrators, you have so much on your plate. Give me the big picture. What is all this about? What am I supposed to do, and how am I supposed to show my school counselor is doing X, Y, Z? Or what should my school counselor be doing? And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't just tossing something else on the plate. So looking at the 21st century school counselor, all of this really started in 2008. When we looked at revising the standards for school counselors. And for those of you that have looked at these standards, they are heavily, heavily, heavily imaging national model, ASCA national model. And ASCA is the American School Counselor Association. From that, we revised the job description. That was also in 2008. Then we swung around and we started hearing about these guidance essential standards. And where were they fitting in? And this is coming along with Common Core. And then, of course, for this calendar year, we roll out the new evaluation instrument. So that's pretty much the big picture of this whole evaluation process. So, when we look at our standards, counselors have 5 standards. Unlike the teachers with that 6th standard, we're going to focus on 5. This is kind of just an outline of where those standards stand and the number of elements that fall under those standards under the evaluation tool. The biggie, and we were talking earlier, the big one is school counselor and leadership. You know, in your building, how is your school counselor exhibiting leadership? Is it that they are a part of your school improvement team? Is it that they are the lead for certain committees? Is it that they are your direct line to your community resources, your collaboration with your stakeholders? This is how we're talking about exhibiting leadership. How are they looking at the data in your schools? How are they advocating for students? You know, are they developing programs that are reaching all students when we're talking about leadership? Standard 2, school counselors promote a respectful environment for the diverse population of students. Are we serving all students? Are we educating our staff on different learning styles for different students, different cultural practices of our students? Standard 3, school counselors understand and facilitate the implementation of a comprehensive school counseling program. In comprehensive school program, we're basically saying, are we meeting the academic, personal, social, and career needs of all of our students? No longer are we serving just the top 10% of our students, those that are going to college. We know they're going to college. No longer are we just looking at the students that have all of the at-risk indicators. We're looking at program activities, program ideas that are going to address these 3 domains for all of our students. And when we're talking about that comprehensive program, we're talking about how we facilitate those programs. Individual counseling, small group, classroom curriculum, school-wide programs and initiatives, collaboration with your community, all of your stakeholders. That's what a comprehensive program looks like. Getting away from those days of, I've always done this, this is what I like to do. Making sure that your program is data-driven. Why do you have a divorce group in your building? Why do you have a small group that's focused on 3rd grade reading? Everything should be data-driven with a comprehensive program. Standard 4, school counselors promote learning for all students. It's kind of overlapping again, making sure that we're addressing the needs for all of our students and not just select groups or pockets of students. In Standard 5, school counselors actively reflect on their practice. You know, what went well this year? What am I doing? How did I reach these students? You know, did this group help? Should there have been more students enrolled in AP classes? You know, what discussions do I need to have with my administrator? What is the climate of our school? I spoke with one counselor and she said, I've got some wonderful activities, I do this and my students love them. And I said, okay, well great. And I said, well where's your data to show that that program was effective? Well, what data? Well, how do you know your students enjoyed that program? How do you know that's what your students need? Reflecting, you know, so that we can go back and make the necessary changes. Just like a classroom teacher would say, oh, that lesson didn't go well today. What is it that I need to do differently to make sure that every student gets it? Okay? So that's just a quick overview of our standards. And if you've noticed, I put the number of elements around each standard. So when you're looking at that evaluation tool, you can't just look at standard 1 and say, I'm ready to rate. Each standard is broken down into those 4 elements, and you're going to rate on each one of those elements. Okay, so the big question, and I kind of threw some of these out at you already. What I suggest, or what when we were looking at this evaluation tool, these are some of the big questions we want school counselors to ask. And when you're having those conversations with your administrator, these are some questions you need to be thinking about and maybe brainstorming with your administrator. How are students different because of my school counseling program? How am I impacting student achievement? No, we're not classroom teachers, but what we do should have an impact on student achievement. Whether it's through our classroom curriculum, whether it's through our small groups, whether it's through our advocacy, whether it's through us looking at data, whether it's attendance data, whether it's testing, whether it's discipline. What courses should we make available to our students? What resources do our students need? How am I reaching all stakeholders? How do your parents know who the school counselor is? How do your parents know why you, or how you know my student? I worked in a school before. This was in another state, and I was at an elementary school, and I went on a field trip. I was one of the chaperones for the field trip. And I was speaking with this parent, and he said to me, he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "My name is Mrs. Northlead." I said, "I'm one of the school counselors." And he said to me, "Oh, you don't know my son. You don't know my son. My son doesn't have any problems." And I said, "Actually, I do know your son. I know Jacob." And he was, "How do you know Jacob?" And I said, "Well, I know all of my students." And I had to go down the list, and I had to let him know. I know Jacob through classroom guidance, and I can tell you, Jacob's very good at X, Y, Z. How do your parents, how do your stakeholders know who you are? How do you advertise your program? How do you let them know what resources you can provide, what services you provide? Is it through your website? Is it through parent conferences? Is it through PTA meetings, etc.? Got to get your word out there. And the idea behind that is, at no point should anybody, especially in your building, say, "I don't know what my school counselor does. I don't know where she is. I don't know where he is. I don't know what they do." Last one. How am I preparing students for college and career readiness? And that's K-12. On the elementary level, what are you doing to talk about career interests? What are you doing to expose students to college? Are you taking college tours, even on the elementary level? Are you guys doing college scavenger hunts? Are you doing career days, etc.? Now, if you're thinking about these big questions, then you're ready for the next step, and that's the self-assessment. And this is one of those where the self-assessment and the rubric is the same thing, okay? But when you're looking at the self-assessment, think about those big questions we just looked at. Because this is your evaluation of yourself. Now, with the self-assessment, this is for your view only. This is not something that you have to, as a part of this evaluation process, you do not have to share the self-assessment with your administrator. If you choose to, wonderful, but it's not mandated that you share this with your administrator. But this is basically it, and I only scanned one slide of it, and this is standard one. Now, when you're looking at the self-assessment and how you're rating yourself, and remember, this is element. This is one of the elements, element A. When you're evaluating yourself and you're looking, you're checking off. Collaborate with school staff to create a positive learning community. What discussions are you having with your staff? Are you participating in grade level meetings? Are you asking for feedback as to, what are the needs of that particular grade level? Are you asking for feedback on, particular lesson topics or what have you? Now, when you're scoring yourself on this rubric, it's a growth model, okay? So, I'm checking off and you see the areas: developing, proficient, accomplished, distinguished. And for my administrators, we wanted to keep it consistent, so that it wouldn't be, okay, now I've got to learn a whole new set of dynamics and words to describe, what the school counselor should be doing. But as this flows in order for you, when you're looking at if you're going to be proficient, accomplished, or distinguished, I don't even like to say developing, because I think we should come to the table that way. So, and I always think ahead. So, but in order for me to be rated as proficient or accomplished, the chart before, every item has to be checked off. Okay? So if I'm checked off 3 here, and I've checked off 2 here, and I've checked off 1 in accomplished, unfortunately, I'm going to have to rate myself as developing, because I have not checked off everything in proficient. Does that make sense? But again, the self-assessment and the rubric, it's the same document. The self-assessment is at the beginning of the year, and the rubric, the final, would be at the end of the year. Now, along with this rubric, this is not, unfortunately, we're not in home base yet. We do have the fillable instruments, but unlike the teacher documents, this is not in home base at this time. But this rubric is also used as kind of like a guide during your observations. Now, when you're in an observation, whether it's formal or informal, classroom setting, small group, school-wide activity, or what have you, there's no way that you're going to be able to check everything off using this rubric. That's where it's going to be discussions with your school counselor, and you're going to have to be looking at some of the things that you see throughout the year to kind of fill in some of those indicators that you wouldn't see during an observation. Okay? All right. Again, the performance rating, and I like to simplify them a little bit. Developing, to me, you still need support. You're kind of unsure of what you're doing. Proficient, you can demonstrate how students are different because of your school counseling program. Accomplished, you go above and beyond. Okay. Distinguished, not only are you going above and beyond, but you're training others beyond just your school setting. So it would be that school counselor that is presenting on the district level. It could be that school counselor that may be presenting at state and national conferences, that sort of thing. All right, so when we're thinking about comprehensive program measures, and this goes back to you're not going to be able to see everything during a classroom observation. What are some other areas that you can look at when you're thinking about this evaluation? Individual student planning. Again, that's K-12. A lot of times when we think of individual student planning, we automatically think of high school. When we think about those graduation plans, we think about college applications, etc. But on the elementary level, you know, what involvement might you have in the personal learning plans? Are you on committees, whether it be RTI, whether it be 504? Are you having individual parent conferences with certain students and their parents? Okay. Now, preventive. Is the program preventive? I did a little homework and I was talking with Grant. You guys are big on Rachel's challenge here, right? Okay. How does that look in your building? You know, what are you doing to extend knowledge to your staff, to your parents, to your students? Okay. Responsive services again, system support, professional development. Are you participating in professional development? Are you providing professional development for your staff? What trainings are you offering your staff members? And again, the college and career planning. And I like to look at, I love the 3 E's when you're thinking about enrollment, enlistment, and employment. What are you doing? K-5. K-5, I look at it more of as the exposure. Middle, I look at it as starting those goal-setting plans, understanding the connection between academic and the workforce and careers in college. And then by the time we get to high school, we're mapping it out. I love it when I can go into one of my elementary schools and I can go into a classroom setting and the students are talking about, you know, North Carolina science program. We have the opportunity to take some students to North Carolina Central. They have this wonderful bio tech center where students, we took about 30 students from one particular school and they were able to extract DNA from a strawberry. And you hear these students talking about, I've never been on a college campus before. And now, you know, and I go into a 5th grade class and they're talking about financial aid, financial literacy, that sort of thing. It's never too early. So, as administrators, is your school counselor's program inviting? Do they know who the counselor is? Is the counselor approachable? Are they respectful? Are they supportive? Do they advocate for students? Do they include all students? Flexible? Data-driven? That's the biggie. Are they developmentally appropriate? Prevention-oriented? And I like this one, integrated and overlapping in its approach to student needs. That's where you really have to know who your students are. You have to know their learning styles. You have to know what makes them tick. You have to know what motivates them. You have to know what's going on when they leave school and how that may be impacting how they behave in school, how they perform in school. Align with local goals and state and national best practices. The school counselor's program, is it aligned with the school mission? Is it aligned with the district's mission? Do they have a mission of their own? Every school counseling program should have a mission statement. That mission statement is based on your beliefs. What do you believe about your students? What do you believe about your stakeholders? And that should, along with data, drive the program. Inclusive of activities that support closing the achievement gap. Meeting demands of 21st century learning. You know? Are our activities creative? Are we collaborating? Are we teaching students how to use effective communication skills, etc.? Again, connected with all stakeholders. And reflective of program goals and results. Did you set your goals at the beginning of the year? And how were those goals determined? What data did you look at to determine what the goals of your program need to be? And what were your results? The million-dollar question. So how's that working for you? Okay. Do we need to tweak it a little bit? Do we need to start from scratch? Do we need to increase the amount of that we're looking at? So, we kind of talked about this earlier as far as when you're actually at the end of the year and you're ready for your final evaluation, when you're scoring. And it's this up-down model because it's the growth. So every item you're going down, you start from the left and work your way over. Every item in a column has to be checked off in order for you to be rated for that particular column. Okay? So that's what those arrows indicate. Okay. How can administrators gather evidence? Classroom observations, the formal and the informal. And the way that the instrument is set up, just like in the past, for non-career status, which will be known over everywhere, but 3 formal observations. For those that are career, 1 formal and 2 informal. Classroom observations, small groups, and we have to be careful with those small groups to make sure that it's not one of that's going to release any confidentiality. I use the example of new student group. If you've got a group that's welcoming to a new group, or you've got an eyeglasses group or what have you, those are great avenues to kind of interview. I'm sorry, not interview, but do an observation. School counselor activities. You know, they can be school-wide, they can be workshops, they can be training, they can be parent groups or what have you, parent information sessions. For those on the high school level, it might be college night, might be FAFSA completion, etc. Reviewing the PGP. Looking at some of the artifacts that your school counselor may have. And some of those you may not even have to ask, you know. You may see some type of flyer or advertisement of an upcoming school counselor initiative advertised through your school. It may be on the website. It may be on the marquee. It may be in the school counselor's newsletter. It may be because there's been collaboration with the school counselor in 6th grade, it may be in the 6th grade newsletter. And observation of the code of ethics. Is your school counselor an ethical person? Looking at accountability measures, you know. In my district, we have our accountability measure. We use kind of like our time assessment, you know. I can actually go in and I can pull up said counselor and I can see where they are spending majority of their time for the month. Is majority of their time spent through classroom guidance? Is majority of their time spent in individual planning? Because we have a system where they keep a monthly calendar and we have it color-coded. So when I look at my pie chart, I know if I see a mass area of blue, I know that there's been a lot of individual counseling at that particular school. And if I want to dig a little deeper, I can say, okay, looking at the data, what's been going on? When they're turning in their SIT forms or what have you, what's going on at Smith Elementary that, you know, has there been a shift? You know, is there something going on in that community? That sort of thing. So looking at your code of ethics, how ethical and what measures of accountability does your school counselor have in place? Okay, so possible artifacts. When you look at the evaluation tool, there are some listed after each standard, but I wanted to kind of specify a little bit more, and if we want to have more discussion during this time, that's fine too. But when I think about the particular standards, and I think about standard 1 being leadership, school independent team, 504, PBIS, RTI. Now, when you're talking about these particular committees, when I'm thinking about leadership, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be the coordinator of that particular team. But my activity, my participation on that team, am I advocating? Am I thinking about the school as a whole? Am I thinking about how we're serving students that need that additional support? Okay? If you're the coordinator of that particular team, wonderful. But you don't necessarily have to be. Okay? Your annual agreement. That's a big artifact because that gives you, when you're signing that annual agreement, everybody familiar with the annual agreement? That's dialogue with you and your administrator, and you're saying, this is how I want to display my leadership within our building. Having that dialogue with your administrator so that you and your administrator are keeping a pulse of what's going on in your building. What's going on with your stakeholders. How are you meeting the needs of your building? For those that may be progressing to that point, your national model plans. Ask the national model. And when I'm thinking about those plans, I'm thinking about those action plans. What are you going to make sure that every student in this particular grade level is going to receive in the area of academic support?
Can you elaborate on the annual agreement?
The annual agreement, again, that's part of the national model, but some districts are using just that. And the annual agreement should be kind of like it's not a contract, but it basically is a chance. This is what I'm going to do.
Okay.
This is based on data that I've received from our school improvement plan. It's based on attendance data, whatever the needs of that school are. I'm having a dialogue with you, and I'm saying, this is what I want to do in my school counseling program that are going to address the needs of our school. This is where I want to spend the majority of my time.
Is that typically a district decision to do that with all counselors, or is that a site-based?
Site-based.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Frank, you want to expand on that?
However, as part of the evaluation, we just asked that all the counselors do that with your principal. So, we'd like you to do that.
Surprise! I don't know anything about it. You know about that.
We know.
Okay.
Yeah, Maryland knows about it, but anyway.
In my district, we are a district that's very heavy on the Ask the National model. Every site has to complete the Ask the National model. And inclusive of that is the annual agreement. But it's basically an opportunity for principals and school counselors to have dialogue so that you know what your school counselor is doing. Yeah. So you know where the school counselor is spending their time. So you know where the school counselor's accountability measures are. If I'm not in my office, my calendar is posted, the secretary knows where I am, that sort of thing.
And she does all of that. I just wasn't familiar with it. A document,
Yes.
an annual agreement is a document.
Now, Grant, are you guys using the one that's on the wiki
Yes.
website? Okay. So that might be a good push out for administrators.
Yeah,
too.
definitely.
For my school counselors that are in here, how many of you have advisory council? Okay, wonderful. Advisory council basically is it's kind of like a team of stakeholders for your building, and it says, what do you see as the needs? You've got people from your community, you've got teachers, you have hopefully an administrator on that team, and it's kind of like another guiding post for you to develop a comprehensive program. When you're looking at AP and EC students, what are we doing to increase AP enrollment? What are we doing to make sure that we're providing support services that our EC students may need? If you've given presentations, whether it be at school, at the district, on the state level, and again, accountability documentation. It might be your weekly calendar, it might be your monthly calendar, and it's showing how many individual sessions you may have had, how many classroom visits you may have had. Standard 2. And what you will see with some of these artifacts, they can be used in multiple standards. So I don't want you to think that only said artifacts can be used just for one standard. Some of them are overlapping. So when you look at standard 2, and we're talking about promoting a respectful environment, surveys are a good way to look at how you're being effective and how your program and how you are being perceived. Student surveys, parent surveys. Okay. Again, your action plans, web pages, they're big. And I'll tell you, I am not a techie at all. But a lot of times when I'm doing my homework, that's the first avenue that I'll take. I'll go to the web page, see what I can find out. I remember when, I'm originally from North Carolina, but moved out of state, and when we were moving back, that's the first thing I did when we were looking about where we wanted to live, where we wanted to buy a house. I was going to websites, and I was looking at the schools, and because I'm a school counselor, where would I go? Immediately, I went to school counselor pages. There's that mission statement again. If you do not have a mission statement as a department, that's where you need to start. What do you believe in? Your list of small groups, parent contact logs, community outreach logs, especially this time of year. You see a lot of community outreach. Standard 3, understanding and facilitating and the implementation of a comprehensive school counseling program. Again, your weekly calendars, your monthly calendars. That mission statement comes back. School data reports. How have you analyzed the data? How have you looked at it to say, these are the programs that I want to offer. These are the activities I want to offer. And then now that I've offered those activities and those programs, what were the results? How did they help impact student achievement? How did they help whatever the need might be? Program agendas. All of these are artifact ideas. Standard 4, promoting learning for all students. How are you conducting these assessments? How do you know if I walk into Ms. Jones' class that the level in which I am delivering my lesson, her students are getting it? It's clicking, it's making sense. Those needs assessments whether it's for your classroom lessons or whether it's when you're sitting on that 504 committee and you're discussing Susan, or you're sitting on that IEP committee and you're discussing another student. That makes your input relevant because you've looked at the data. Hopefully you've had some interaction at some point. And it can be a relevant discussion about how you can advocate for that student because you know that this is what that particular student needs. This is how they work best, etc. Emails, contact forms. That's a part of your collaboration. Your lesson plans. Again, the annual agreement. An annual program calendar. When you're setting your goals with your administrator, it's okay to show them what your plan is for the year. Everybody knows October is what?
Red ribbon.
Red Ribbon Week. What's going to be going on in your building for Red Ribbon Week? Everybody knows that November we have College Application Week. How are you promoting College Application Week? Even on the elementary level. What are you doing? Are you guys doing mock college applications? Are you doing Connect Ed messages? Because sometimes we might have an elementary student that has a sibling at the high school. Okay? Curriculum plans. Again, what am I doing to address those domains? Academic support, career development, and personal social. And standard 5, when we're looking at the reflection process. Okay? Again, you're going back to the results reports from your program. What worked, what didn't work. You're looking at, for those of you that may have a closing the gap plan, what you're doing specifically through school counseling that's assisting in closing the achievement gap in your school. For those that are tackling the beast of national boards. Okay? The application process itself, the submission or the renewal. Your data menu. The end of the year is a good time to look at all of the data for your school because it helps you plan for the upcoming year. Are you looking at attendance rates? Are you looking at discipline rates? Are you looking at graduation rates? Are you looking at dropout rates? Are you looking at AP enrollment? The list can go on. A certificate from professional development that you participated in. Feedback summary from surveys that you've conducted. And professional association membership. That's how we continue to grow. That's how we know what's going on nationally. Statewide. Okay. So when you're looking at the summary rating, we talked earlier about the rubric and how to growth model and how you have to have every item checked off in a column before you can move to the next. Now remember, that's for each element. So your summary rating basically breaks down each standard and the elements, and you rate. This is the scoring. How was standard A rated? Was it developing or was it proficient? The example that we used, standard A would have been developing. Okay. And then what you do is after you check the overall rating for each element, then you average, and that gives you your overall rating for that particular standard. And at the end of each standard, again, there's some evidence or documentation that you might use to support adding to the list of artifacts that I gave you for standard 5. And at the bottom, when a school counselor is rated developing or not demonstrating on any element or standard, they should be strongly encouraged to develop a goal to address that area for the upcoming year. So when you're looking at that PGP, you've already got some goals in place. Now this is a calendar. We're a little behind, but we can catch up. Okay? It's not the end of the world. We can catch up. Now, when you're looking at that mid-year PGP review, now that's your school counselor that you're having some trouble with. Okay? If everything is going fine, then you really don't have to do that mid-year review. But if you've got some concerns, that's when we need to be having that additional conversation. Now this is the calendar for non-career with those 3 observations, and remember they all have to be formal. Same calendar, this one is just for career status at this point. And this is the abbreviated, the one who has the career status but only needs. This is the, I'm sorry, this one, we don't even have to discuss that one because they took tenure away, so I'm not going to go there. But these two are pretty much the same. So you just have a little catch up. All right, and I put these terms, yes.
This question may be for you, but may also be for Grant. Are we going to get copies of these calendars?
They're on the wiki site also.
Okay.
And I put these in there. These were the ones that I wasn't sure where you guys were on the pendulum for at the national model. It seems like you guys were. And so let's spend our last 10-15 minutes on questions that you have.
Okay, so on the wiki,
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of stuff there, so how would we particularly find this? Would we look for your name?
My presentation is not on the wiki. Grant's going to have this presentation.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll share it with everybody in a folder.
that would be awesome. Because the wiki, sometimes I spend a lot of time trying to find a certain thing and I don't have time to waste, quite frankly. So I would like to be more efficient.
Really? You don't have time to leave?
No, I really don't.
I have a question for Grant. Grant, I'm concerned about the timeline because we're behind, so I guess I need to know, are we just very flexible in terms of time? 'Cause that's what I want to hear.
You know, we've not had any guidance on that. What I've been telling everybody is that we're going to have some grace on this for sure. We started with this process with the counselors at our summer institute. They should have done the self-assessment, you know, and we've actually made time that they hadn't done, we've done that, and their first kind of initial PGP piece. So really what we're behind on is the evaluation part. So my thought process was, you know, you do the first one as soon as you can. If you need a mid-year, you can do it February-ish, you know, because our first semester doesn't end until the end of January anyway. And then you do your last one, you know, whenever it's appropriate at the end of the year. So With all the transition, we definitely have to have a little grace here.
Okay, you said, okay, you do the first one and then mid-year around February-ish.
Yeah.
Okay, now with the teacher evaluation instrument, you have to have so many days between. You can't just do, but this one is not like that. Okay.
Now, I have actually shared all the forms and things with you, but I'm going to put them all in a folder for today's training, so you'll have an easy way to get back to it, and we'll have to search for it, because I know that you've got a lot of stuff shared with you via Google. So we'll do that, wrap it up here, as well as link to the video for today.
Is it possible, because your PowerPoint is good, is it possible for you to share that with Brad?